My parents kicked me out of the house for trying to submit my college applications, so I made a song about them and submitted it as my audition. They got so angry I had to get a restraining order against them, but not even that stopped them, so I had to resort to extremes. I always knew that my parents never loved, but only last week, while I was recording my auditions for music college, did I fully realize just how bad it was. My day was going like usual. Mom forgot to make breakfast, but only for me, and Dad borrowed $50 out of my account for drinks with friends, but then they actually did something for me, except it wasn't for me, it was to me. They destroyed my guitar. Literally in the middle of me recording my college application, my dad grabbed my guitar off me and just started smashing it on the ground over and over. His reason? My younger sister Laurietta. She's their golden child and has been since the day she was born. My parents have always had this obsession with difficult kids, so when they found out she had autism, they fell in love with her and forgot about me. Add on to that the fact that she's a gymnast like my mom was, whilst I'm into music, something my parents call me gay for, and you can see why my sister grew up with a superiority complex. After smashing my guitar, my dad told me I wasn't allowed to play guitar anymore, because my sister's autism means she can't handle loud noises. Now that would be understandable, had I not paid $750 freaking dollars for the world's best autism-friendly noise-canceling headphones that she intentionally doesn't use so I can't play my guitar. I told my dad so, and he damn near backhanded me for attitude. I remember asking him if I could go to my cousin Jay's house to record instead, and he told me he doesn't give an F where I go, as long as I don't disturb my sister. And so, I packed my bags and made my way to Jay's. He was a little bit older than me, and also a musician. The second he saw me, he dapped me up and told me it was nice to see me, and chuckled about how I broke my guitar because I couldn't play the piece right. I was taken aback. "What do you mean I broke my guitar?" I asked Jay. "Oh, your dad called me maybe 30 minutes ago saying you got angry because you kept messing up recording and smashed your guitar everywhere, so you're coming here to record. Not cool, dude." My face went white. That one single thing was enough to tell me everything my family thought of me. I think Jay noticed something was wrong because he asked me if everything was okay, and I just couldn't hold it in. I started bawling my eyes out. I was usually very stoic and cold. Years of being neglected made me this way, but I could no longer do it. The fact I wasn't loved hurt me. The fact my parents always treated me like a stranger made the child in me cry every day, and I finally let it out. Jay stared at me as if I had 5 heads, but instead of speaking, he just hugged me. After I calmed down, I opened up about what happened, and when I did, Jay's face went from one of concern to one of pure anger. He told me to wait before going outside and making a phone call to someone. I remember hearing him yell incoherently, saying something about autism, beating up, and cursing a lot. When he came back, his face was red with anger. As it turned out, he had called my dad and confronted him. My dad tried to play off what he did as a harmless joke, and tried to convince Jay that he never told him I broke my own guitar, but Jay wasn't having it. He essentially told my dad it wasn't over, and that he'd better watch his back. I remember being shook, and for the first time in my life, allowing myself to feel. Jay and I ended up ditching our plans to record music auditions, and instead went on a guy's excursion, copping some last-minute tickets to an NBA game. I had a lot of fun at the game and almost completely forgot all about my parents, until Jay apologized to me. He told me as someone older and close to me, he should have been smart enough to see what my parents were doing, that he should have never believed their lies. He promised to always be there for me, and that from now on, anytime I ever have a problem on my parents' side, I should call him, and he'd help me deal with it. I felt myself wanting to cry when he said that. I'd been waiting my whole life for someone to tell me they see me, and they care for me. And so later after the game, and after Jay took me to buy a new guitar, what a guy I have to say. We were in his studio recording my auditions when I got the genius idea. I composed my own short little song, all about my life, specifically about how my parents love my sister and hate me, how they break my things, how they give her presents on my birthday, and how they've flat out told me I was less than her. That was my audition song, and I gotta say, it came out amazing. Jay thought it was the funniest thing in the world, and because the two of us were a little tipsy, we thought it would be a funny idea to send the song to my parents. This was definitely not my smartest move, but in that moment, it felt like the only way to make them understand how much they'd hurt me. I woke up the next morning with a massive headache and 27 missed calls from my parents. Not exaggerating. 27 calls in the span of about 6 hours, plus a bunch of texts ranging from, "Call us right now," to, "We're worried about you," to, "Stop being so dramatic and come home." Jay was already up making coffee, and neither of us wanted to deal with the drama right away. We decided to grab breakfast at a local diner and postpone the inevitable confrontation. The pancakes were good, but sat like rocks in my nervous stomach. I kept checking my phone, partly dreading and partly hoping for more messages. Instead, I got a text from Laurietta asking what I'd done to make our parents so upset. That was their classic move, turning her against me whenever I stood up for myself. I wasn't ready to explain everything to her, so I just texted back that they should ask themselves that question. I know that was a bit cryptic, but I didn't want to drag her into the middle of this mess. Jay suggested I stay at his place for a few days to let things cool down, but his apartment only had 1 bedroom. He was already sleeping on the couch to give me some privacy, which made me feel guilty. He called his friend Marcus, who had a spare room I could crash in. I felt awkward about imposing, but Jay assured me Marcus was cool with it. When we arrived at Marcus's place, I was grateful for the temporary refuge, but as a complete stranger to Marcus, I felt awkward and intrusive. I immediately offered to chip in for rent and help around the house. I didn't want to be that freeloader relative that everyone talks about behind their back, you know? Marcus turned out to be a music producer with his own small studio set up in his apartment, which seemed like an incredible stroke of luck given my situation. He listened to what I had of my audition recording and pointed out some technical issues with the mix. He offered to help me polish it properly for my application, which was incredibly kind considering he barely knew me. He showed me how to use some of his equipment equipment, and it was honestly the first time in days I felt any kind of excitement about anything. Working with Marcus on my music was incredibly validating, but our session was interrupted when Jay called saying my dad had shown up at his apartment looking for me. That freaked me all of us out, and we decided to keep my location secret for the time being. I keep picturing my dad going door to door like some deranged detective, which would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. My mom finally reached me by phone that evening, demanding I come home immediately. I stood my ground and refused, which led to her threatening to report me as a runaway to the police. Her voice had that fake sweet tone she always used when trying to manipulate me, and I could hear my dad breathing heavily in the background. The runaway threat worried me since I was only 17. Marcus's roommate Patricia, a law student, overheard the conversation and assured me that given the circumstances and evidence of my dad's violence, I had options. She explained something about constructive emancipation that I didn't fully understand, but it sounded official enough to calm me down. We documented everything, including photos of my destroyed guitar that Jay had taken before we left my house. Patricia helped me draft a formal statement about what happened, but she was concerned my parents might try to sabotage my college applications. She suggested sending preemptive emails to the music schools explaining my situation, which seemed extreme but also necessary. I tried calling my cousin BR, who had always been kind to me, hoping for some moral support. He was the more responsible cousin, the one with the steady job and the house in the suburbs. I discovered my parents had already contacted him with their version of events. They'd been calling the entire extended family, painting me as an ungrateful, unstable teenager. I spent an hour explaining the truth and played him the audio recording I'd secretly made during the guitar smashing incident. I'd had my phone recording in my pocket because I was trying to capture some song ideas before my dad came in. The universe works in mysterious ways sometimes, I guess. BR was horrified by the recording and immediately took my side. He mentioned that the family was already divided over the situation, with some people believing my parents and others skeptical. Some of my aunts and uncles were arguing about it in the family group chat, which made me feel simultaneously supported and mortified. BR offered to host a family meeting at his house as neutral territory to try to sort things out. I agreed to the meeting on the condition that Jay and Marcus would come with me for support. My father insisted it should be family only, so BR had to negotiate a compromise where Jay could attend, but wait in another room. I felt sick about the whole idea, but I couldn't see any other way forward. As the meeting approached, my anxiety spiked dramatically. I wasn't sleeping well, jumping at every noise and constantly checking the locks on Marcus's apartment door. Marcus taught me some breathing techniques he used before performances, which helped me maintain my composure when the day arrived. He also gave me a small, smooth stone to keep in my pocket and rub when I felt anxious, which sounds silly, but actually helped a lot. Walking into BR's house, I saw my parents and Laurietta already seated in the living room. My father immediately started with accusations rather than listening to anything I had to say. He called me manipulative, dramatic, attention-seeking, all his greatest hits. BR had to intervene, establishing ground rules for the conversation. I finally had the chance to speak my truth to my entire family, explaining how I'd been treated differently from Laurietta for years. I described how birthdays were big productions for her, but often forgotten for me. How my dad would criticize my music while praising Laurietta for the smallest accomplishments. Halfway through explaining my feelings, my mother burst into tears claiming I was destroying the family. Classic deflection technique. Make herself the victim when confronted with her own behavior. The meeting ended in chaos, with nothing resolved. My Aunt Margie tried to suggest family therapy, but my dad shot that down immediately. After the disastrous family meeting, I returned to Marcus's apartment feeling defeated. I found an email from one of my music teachers, Ms. Chen, asking why I'd missed lessons. With everything going on, I had completely forgotten to let her know what was happening. I called her and explained everything that had happened. Ms. Chen was furious on my behalf and offered to help me complete my college applications. She warned that without a legal guardian signature on some forms, I might face obstacles. She connected me with a youth advocacy program called Second Chord that helped teens in difficult family situations. I had to fill out what felt like a million forms documenting my situation. The counselor at Second Chord, Jordan, took my case seriously and suggested we pursue emancipation. Jordan explained that emancipation would legally recognize me as independent from my parents, which would solve the financial aid issues for college. The legal process would take months though, so we focused on immediate solutions like securing my personal documents from my parents' house. I made a list of essential items I needed from home, but was afraid to go back alone. I imagined my dad blocking the door or following me from room to room, which made my stomach twist into knots. Jordan arranged for a police escort for a scheduled time to retrieve my belongings, which felt both reassuring and extremely dramatic. When we arrived at my house, my mother seemed subdued and different, watching silently as I packed my things. She looked smaller somehow, like she had aged years in just a week. My father was belligerent, following us around and claiming I was stealing items he had purchased. He kept telling the officer things like, "That laptop was a gift, she doesn't own it," even though I'd bought it with my own money. The officer had to repeatedly remind him to maintain distance. As I was leaving with my belongings, Laurietta appeared in the doorway of her room looking confused and upset. She was stimming more than usual, rocking back and forth and twisting her fingers together. When I tried to speak with her, my father immediately pulled her away. I left her a note explaining that none of this was her fault and that I loved her, hoping she'd find it before my parents did. Back at Marcus's place, I discovered my birth certificate and passport were missing from the documents I'd collected. Jordan said this was a common control tactic by abusive parents. It was like Jordan had a handbook of all the messed up things my parents might try. We filed paperwork to get replacement documents, which meant more forms and more waiting. Through Second Chord, I connected with other teens in similar situations during a group session. Hearing their stories stories made me realize how normalized family dysfunction had become in my life. Some had it worse, some had it better, but we all shared that same look in our eyes, a mixture of wariness and hope. I decided to start therapy with Dr. Sawyer, who specialized in family trauma. My first session was incredibly uncomfortable, with me perched on the edge of the couch like I might need to run at any moment. Dr. Sawyer suggested I write letters to my family members, expressing my feelings without necessarily sending them. This exercise seemed pointless at first, but as I kept writing, all these feelings I didn't even know I had started pouring out. During this exercise, I realized I had complicated feelings of resentment toward Laurieta. I had to confront my misplaced anger and recognize she was also a victim of our parents' dysfunction. It wasn't her fault that our parents treated her differently, and my anger should be directed at them, not her. This realization hit me hard, making me question how much of my relationship with my sister had been shaped by our parents' manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number, which turned out to be Laurieta using a friend's phone. She said she missed me and didn't understand why I was being so dramatic about everything. She seemed to be repeating our parents' narrative about me being dramatic. I felt a surge of frustration, but tried to stay calm as I responded. I sent her a video clip of the guitar smashing incident as proof. I knew it might upset her, but I needed her to understand that I wasn't just making this up. After seeing the video, Laurieta texted back expressing shock and asking more questions. She seemed genuinely surprised by my dad's behavior, which made me wonder what version of events they'd told her. I wasn't sure if I could trust her completely. What if she was just gathering information to report back to our parents? I agreed to meet her at a public library where we could talk privately. I chose a spot near the reference desk where staff could see us, just in case my parents tried anything. At the library, Laurieta admitted that our parents had always told her I was jealous of her. They'd apparently been feeding her this narrative for years, telling her that my attitude problems stemmed from resentment of her autism. Seeing the video made her question everything she'd been told. She promised to pay more attention to how our parents spoke about me when I wasn't around. Laurieta revealed that Mom had been crying a lot since I left. Dad kept insisting they needed to present a united front against my manipulation. Their marriage was showing signs of strain for the first time that I could remember. Cracks were beginning to form in their relationship. Before we parted, Laurieta hugged me for the first time in years. It was awkward, but also weirdly healing. Our dad called repeatedly during our meeting, demanding to know where she was. She had to leave quickly, promising to stay in touch secretly. I watched her walk away and felt simultaneously protective and sad about the position she was in. The conversation with Laurieta gave me hope for reconciliation with at least part of my family. I received a formal email from my dad threatening legal action if I didn't return home. The email was full of legal jargon that he'd obviously copied from some website. It mentioned parental rights and legal custody and other terms that sent my anxiety through the roof. Jordan and the Second Chord legal team had to get involved. Jordan arranged for me to meet with Marge, a pro bono attorney who specialized in youth rights. She explained that my options were limited without evidence of physical abuse. The guitar incident counted as destruction of property, but not as direct abuse toward me. We focused on building a case around emotional abuse and the guitar incident. We filed for a temporary restraining order against my father based on the guitar incident and his showing up at Jay's apartment. The judge was skeptical at first, saying things like, "Families have disagreements," that made me want to scream. The judge was reluctant to grant it without additional evidence, so Jay testified about my father's threatening behavior at his apartment. He described how my dad had pounded on his door for 15 minutes straight, yelling loud enough for neighbors to complain. The judge granted a limited restraining order requiring my father to maintain distance and cease contact. My mother was not included in the order, so she began calling me constantly, alternating between pleading and guilt-tripping. She'd call crying one minute, then switch to angry accusations the next. It was emotional whiplash listening to her go back and forth like that. I tried explaining to my mother how her neglect had affected me. I gave specific examples, like the time I got the lead in the school play and neither parent attended, even though they'd gone to every one of Laurieta's therapy appointments that same week. She kept deflecting, saying, "We did the best we could with what we had." I realized she wasn't ready to acknowledge her role in my pain. Every conversation circled back to how hard it had been for them, never addressing my feelings at all. My father violated the restraining order by showing up at Marcus's apartment building. Marcus had installed a security camera at the entrance after Jay told him about my dad showing up at his place, so we had video evidence to submit to the court. The violation strengthened our legal position, but my father claimed he was just there to check on my welfare. He tried to play the concerned parent role, telling the judge he was worried about my mental state. The judge issued a stern warning rather than immediate consequences, which was frustrating, but better than nothing. My 18th birthday was approaching, which would legally free me from parental control. I was counting down the days, marking them off on a calendar Marcus had given me. I discovered my college savings account had been emptied. I had about $12,400 saved up from my part-time jobs over the years, and it was all gone. Marge filed an emergency petition to freeze my parents' assets pending investigation. She explained that money earned by a minor technically belongs to the parents in most states, but there were exceptions we could argue. The financial investigation revealed my father had withdrawn $12,400 from my account the day after I left home. The time timing made his intentions pretty obvious. He claimed it was to safeguard my money from my irresponsible decisions. The judge didn't buy his explanation and ordered the full amount returned plus legal fees. This was my first real victory, and it gave me hope that the system might actually work for me. With my birthday 2 days away, I received a package from my mother containing old family photos and a tearful voicemail. The photos showed happier times, family vacations, holiday gatherings, moments where we looked like a normal, loving family. It hit me hard, making me question if I was overreacting to everything. There was no actual apology or acknowledgement of wrongdoing in her message, though. I recognized it as another manipulation tactic, designed to make me nostalgic for a family harmony that never really existed. On my 18th birthday, Jay, Marcus, Patricia, and my music friends threw me a surprise party. They decorated Marcus's apartment with balloons and streamers, and someone had made a cake with a tiny fondant guitar on top. In the middle of it, Laurietta showed up unannounced. I hadn't invited her because I was worried my parents would insist on coming too. I had to decide whether to welcome her or protect my safe space. I was torn between my love for my sister and my need for boundaries with my family. I decided to let Laurietta join the celebration, but discovered she'd been driven there by our mother, who was waiting in the car outside. I felt manipulated again. They knew I wouldn't turn Laurietta away, and used her as a way to get access to me. I faced the dilemma of whether to invite Mom in or maintain boundaries. Against Jay's advice, I went outside to speak with my mother. Our conversation quickly devolved when she suggested I had overreacted to everything. She still couldn't acknowledge the harm they'd caused, framing it all as a misunderstanding that had spiraled out of control. I set a clear boundary that I wouldn't discuss reconciliation until she acknowledged the harm done. Back inside, Laurietta gave me a birthday gift, a handmade bracelet with guitar charms. She mentioned it was really from both her and Mom. I felt conflicted about accepting it, but didn't want to hurt Laurietta's feelings. The party continued with my new friends, and Marcus surprised me by playing a professionally mixed version of my audition song. He'd spent hours cleaning up the recording we'd made, adding some subtle backing tracks, and making it sound radio-ready. This emotional moment was interrupted by a text from my father. The mood of the celebration was temporarily dampened as I read the message with shaking hands. The text contained a photo of my childhood bedroom, now completely emptied of my remaining possessions. He'd cleared out everything: posters, books, the desk lamp I'd had since elementary school, leaving just the bare furniture. It was his way of saying I no longer had a home there. Marge assured me this was legally actionable since I hadn't formally moved out all my belongings. We added it to our growing file of evidence. My first college acceptance letter arrived from State University's music program. I was thrilled until I saw the financial aid package, which assumed parental contribution. The FAFSA form still had my parents' income listed, making it look like I had financial support that didn't exist. I had to appeal for independent student status, which meant more paperwork and more explaining my situation to strangers. The financial aid appeal required extensive documentation of my family situation. I had to gather police reports, court documents, letters from therapists and social workers. Reliving the trauma through paperwork was emotionally exhausting. I found myself having nightmares again, waking up in cold sweats thinking my dad was in the room. Jordan connected me with a scholarship program specifically for students in difficult family situations. I wrote yet another essay about my experiences, trying to frame it as a story of resilience rather than victimhood. I was awarded a partial scholarship based on my circumstances and musical talent. It still left a significant funding gap between what I needed and what I had. I started looking into student loans, but the amounts were terrifying. Marcus suggested creating a GoFundMe sharing my story and music. I was hesitant to put my personal trauma online for strangers to see, but I was running out of options. I recorded a simple video explaining my situation and included a clip of me performing. The GoFundMe gained traction when a local musician with a decent following shared it. People started donating small amounts, often with encouraging messages that made me tear up. My father discovered the campaign and reported it as fraudulent, claiming I was exploiting family issues for money. I had to provide additional verification to keep it active, sending the GoFundMe team copies of court documents and the restraining order. Despite the obstacles, we raised enough for my first semester. I needed a steady income for living expenses. Jay helped me land a weekend gig playing at a coffee shop near campus. The pay wasn't great, but it came with free coffee and pastries, which helped with food costs. The regular performances also helped build my confidence back up after everything that had happened. My acceptance package from Berklee College of Music arrived with a substantial scholarship. It was my dream school, but required an in-person audition in Boston. The travel costs seemed impossible until Marcus and Jay pooled resources to buy me a plane ticket. I practiced obsessively for the audition, working on my pieces during every spare moment. The night before my Boston trip, Laurietta called in tears, saying our parents were fighting constantly. She begged me not to tell anyone, worried that she'd get in trouble for reaching out to me. She described how Dad was drinking more and Mom was threatening to leave. I felt torn between protecting her and maintaining my own boundaries. I hated that she was stuck in the middle of this mess, but I wasn't sure what I could do from my current position. I arrived in Boston feeling conflicted about Laurietta's situation. I needed to focus on my audition, but my mind kept drifting back to her distressed phone call. I found the Berklee campus overwhelming. So many talented musicians all in one place. I kept thinking they'd immediately recognize me as a fraud. I channeled all my emotions into my performance, playing both classical pieces and my original song about family. The song had evolved since that first night at Jay's apartment, becoming more nuanced in its exploration of family dynamics. The Berklee audition panel was visibly moved by my performance. One professor questioned whether my emotional attachment to the material might hinder academic growth. He asked if I could separate myself enough from the personal content to accept critique and direction. I had to articulate how my experiences had matured rather than limited me. I explained that music had been my way of processing trauma, not just expressing it. Returning from Boston, I learned that my mother had called Marcus's apartment repeatedly. She had sounded different, apologetic, and worried rather than demanding. Marcus said she seemed genuinely concerned about me, not just trying to control the situation. I cautiously agreed to meet her at a public cafe, choosing a busy time of day in case things went badly. At the cafe, my mother admitted she'd been seeing a therapist and recognized patterns of favoritism. She acknowledged that she and my father had always treated Lorietta and me differently, though she framed it as trying to meet our different needs. She still defended my father's actions as misguided love. She said he'd been under stress at work and hadn't meant to destroy something so important to me. I maintained firm boundaries while acknowledging her small steps toward understanding. I wasn't ready to forgive everything, but I appreciated her effort to see my perspective. Mom revealed that Lorietta had been having increased meltdowns since I left. Instead of blaming me as before, she acknowledged they'd mishandled both our needs. A tiny bridge of understanding began to form between us. She asked if I would consider family therapy with all four of us. I wasn't ready to be in the same room as my father. The thought of sitting across from him, vulnerable in a therapy session, made my stomach churn. I suggested starting with just her, me, and Lorietta. She seemed disappointed but agreed to my terms. My father discovered our meeting and sent a barrage of angry texts to Mom. Instead of capitulating as usual, she stood her ground. This became the first time she'd ever chosen my well-being over his demands. I was shocked to see her standing up to him, even in this small way. It gave me hope that maybe things could actually change. The acceptance letter from Berkeley arrived with their best scholarship offer. It required a decision within 2 weeks. I had to weigh staying closer to this evolving family situation versus pursuing my dream school. The distance would make maintaining my fragile relationship with Mom and Lorietta harder, but it would also put physical space between me and my father. I decided to accept Berkeley's offer and prepare for the move to Boston. I worried about Lorietta's situation without me nearby. I connected her with Jordan at Second Chord for support resources, though I wasn't sure how much she'd be able to access them with our parents controlling her schedule. My mother offered to help with moving expenses as a gesture of reconciliation. I was hesitant to accept anything that might come with strings attached. Financial dependence had always been my parents' way of controlling me. We agreed she would contribute to a specific expense, my new laptop for school, with no conditions. The clear boundaries made the arrangement feel safer. I started our first family therapy session with just Mom and Lorietta. We met at Dr. Turner's office, which had plants everywhere and soft lighting that was supposed to be calming, but just made me more nervous. The therapist, Dr. Turner, immediately identified unhealthy family dynamics that went beyond my father's behavior. She pointed out how Mom had been enabling Dad's controlling behavior for years, and how Lorietta and I had been placed in an unhealthy competition. We all had to confront uncomfortable truths about our roles. I had to admit that I sometimes resented Lorietta for getting preferential treatment, even though it wasn't her fault. Lorietta admitted she'd been aware of the preferential treatment. She had been afraid to lose her special status by defending me. We both realized we'd been pitted against each other by our parents' dysfunction. The revelation was painful, but necessary for both of us. The sessions were making real progress, with Mom showing genuine remorse. My father found out and threatened to cut off financial support to her and Lorietta. Mom had been a stay-at-home parent for most of her adult life and had limited job prospects. His financial control was his strongest leverage. Mom was forced to choose between economic security and healing. I could see the fear in her eyes when she told me about his ultimatum. I encouraged Mom to prioritize her and Lorietta's needs. I offered to continue our therapy sessions separately from Dad. We established a new boundary where my healing wasn't dependent on his participation. Dr. Turner helped us create a communication plan that didn't rely on Dad's cooperation. As moving day approached, I discovered my father had contacted Berkeley claiming I had psychiatric issues. He sent them a lengthy email describing me as unstable and manipulative, suggesting I wasn't mentally fit for their program. The school's confidentiality policies prevented them from discussing me with him. His attempt to sabotage my education failed, which felt like another small victory in this ongoing battle. Jay and Marcus helped me pack up for Boston. The reality of leaving the first supportive environment I'd known was hitting hard. These guys had become like brothers to me in a few short months, providing the family support I'd never had at home. We planned regular video calls and a visit schedule to maintain our connection. The night before departure, my mother came by with a gift, my grandfather's vintage record collection that I'd always loved. She explained that Dad didn't know she was giving it to me. The Beatles, Pink Floyd, Fleetwood Mac, all these classic albums I'd grown up listening to secretly in the basement. I realized she was still caught between loyalty to him and doing right by me. Her small act of rebellion gave me hope that she was finding her own strength. At the airport, I was surprised to see Lorietta had come to say goodbye. She revealed Dad thought she was at a therapy appointment. Our farewell had to be quick and secretive, which put a damper on what should have been a straightforward goodbye. We hugged awkwardly, both aware of the timer counting down until she needed to be back home. Arriving in Boston, I felt both exhilarated by the freedom and overwhelmed by the responsibility. No one was telling me what to do anymore, but that also meant no safety net if I messed up. My roommate Roommate Elijah was welcoming and understood my family situation without making me feel pitied. He had his own complicated family story and recognized the look of someone starting fresh. I found an immediate ally in my new home. During orientation week, I struggled with anxiety about making friends and measuring up musically. Everyone seemed so talented and confident, while I felt like an imposter waiting to be discovered. I joined an impromptu jam session where I played my song about family rejection. I was terrified to be so vulnerable with strangers, but it felt important to be authentic from the start. I connected with other students who resonated with my experiences. Several approached me after to share their own family struggles, and suddenly, I didn't feel so alone. My first phone call with Mom after moving revealed my father had discovered the missing record collection. Instead of backing down, she had finally confronted him about his treatment of me. Their marriage was now in serious jeopardy. She sounded both frightened and liberated, like she was finally seeing their relationship clearly for the first time. Mom asked my advice about what to do about their marriage. I felt uncomfortable with the role reversal. Suddenly, I was the one giving her emotional support. I realized I couldn't be her therapist or marriage counselor. I gently referred her back to Dr. Turner while maintaining supportive boundaries. I explained that I couldn't help her make decisions about her marriage while still processing my own feelings about Dad. My first performance at Berkeley's open mic night was a success. I played my family song plus a new composition I'd been working on about finding chosen family. A video posted online reached my father. He left public comments attempting to undermine my achievement with personal attacks. He created accounts on multiple platforms just to leave messages calling me ungrateful and attention-seeking. The online harassment from my father continued for weeks. Berkeley's IT department helped me strengthen privacy settings and block his access. They were surprisingly understanding about the situation, explaining that they'd dealt with similar issues before. I began to feel safer expressing myself through my music publicly. Mom called to tell me she had asked my father to move out temporarily. He refused to leave their house, claiming he'd paid for it and had the right to stay. After a heated argument that frightened Laurietta, she and Laurietta moved into a small apartment with help from BR. This separation triggered a financial crisis for Mom and Laurietta. Without Dad's income, they struggled to cover basic expenses. I couldn't afford to help them much on my student budget. I sent what I could from my coffee shop earnings, but it was barely enough for groceries. I connected them with the same support services that had helped me, hoping they could access financial assistance and counseling. My father's behavior worsened when he realized Mom was serious about the separation. He started driving by their new apartment, showing up at Laurietta's school, and sending countless messages. His attempts to contact me violated the restraining order. Marge filed for an extension and expansion of the legal protections. The court granted it based on his pattern of escalating behavior. During a video call, Laurietta seemed happier than I'd seen her in years. She explained that even though their apartment was smaller and they had less money, the atmosphere was calmer without Dad's constant anger. She revealed she missed some of her specialized autism supports from our old home. I worked with Jordan to find resources in their new neighborhood. We found a support group for autistic teens that Laurietta could attend weekly, which helped replace some of what she'd lost in the move. My professor selected my family song for a student showcase. I worried about making my personal trauma so public. Was I exploiting my own pain for artistic recognition? I rewrote parts to focus more on resilience and finding chosen family. The revision process helped me reclaim the narrative as one of strength rather than victimhood. The showcase was attended by several industry professionals. Performing such personal material in front of strangers was terrifying. I nearly backed out before Jay called with a pep talk that got me on stage. He reminded me that my story might help others feel less alone in their struggles. The performance received overwhelming positive feedback, and an indie producer expressed interest in recording it. He approached me after the showcase, saying the song had commercial potential beyond its personal significance. This success triggered old feelings of unworthiness. I had an emotional breakdown after the show, hiding in a bathroom stall and hyperventilating. Elijah found me and sat outside the stall, talking calmly until I could breathe normally again. My breakdown led to an important session with Dr. Sawyer about imposter syndrome. We explored how years of being told my needs and accomplishments didn't matter had created deep insecurity about my talents. Recognizing the pattern didn't immediately fix the feeling. The critical voice in my head, which sounded suspiciously like my father, still appeared regularly. I started keeping a daily journal of positive affirmations and achievements. Dr. Sawyer suggested recording my negative thoughts and examining them objectively, which helped me recognize when I was being unnecessarily harsh with myself. Mom called with news that my father had been served divorce papers. He was contesting everything and making threats. He refused mediation and demanded a full trial, seemingly intent on dragging out the process to punish her. She had to get a separate restraining order for herself and Laurietta. The court date for Mom's restraining order coincided with my midterms. Missing these important exams would jeopardize my scholarship. I was torn between supporting her and protecting my academic future. I recorded a video statement for the court instead of appearing in person. I detailed my father's patterns of control and intimidation, providing specific examples from throughout my childhood. The judge granted Mom's restraining order based partly on my testimony. The protection gave Mom the security to proceed with the divorce without fear of direct confrontation. My father's lawyer subpoenaed my therapy records claiming my allegations were fabricated. Dr. Sawyer had to fight to protect my confidentiality, filing motions to quash the subpoena. The legal battling added another layer of stress to an already difficult situation. The stress of the legal battle affected my studies and performances. I started missing assignments and showing up late to rehearsals. My professors noticed the change arrange and offered accommodations. I was embarrassed to need special treatment, but grateful for their understanding. I was able to complete my midterms with extensions, maintaining my academic standing despite everything. During this difficult time, I received an unexpected email from Scott, my father's brother whom I barely knew. He expressed concern about my father's behavior and apologized for not intervening sooner. He had been estranged from my father for years, but had heard about the situation through family gossip. I gained another unexpected ally. Scott revealed that my father had exhibited similar controlling behaviors throughout his life. The family had always enabled him, making excuses for his outbursts and manipulation. Scott offered to testify about the pattern in the divorce proceedings, providing important historical context for the court. With Scott's testimony and mounting evidence, my father finally realized he might lose the divorce case. Instead of reflecting on his actions, he attempted to paint himself as the victim of a family conspiracy. His lawyer suggested a settlement offer to avoid court and further exposure of his behavior. The settlement terms included joint counseling with me as a condition. He was trying to use Mom's financial vulnerability to force reconciliation. I refused to be used as a bargaining chip. My relationship with him wasn't something to be negotiated as part of their divorce. Mom rejected the offer and prepared for trial, though the financial strain was taking a serious toll. As the trial date approached, my father's facade began to crack publicly. At a pre-trial hearing, he lost his temper with the judge, revealing the anger he usually kept hidden from outsiders. Rather than take responsibility, he blamed Mom for poisoning Laurietta and me against him. Mutual friends began to see through his manipulation as his behavior became more erratic and desperate. My winter break was approaching, and I wanted to visit Mom and Laurietta. Returning to the same city as my father caused severe anxiety. I had nightmares about running into him at the grocery store or finding him waiting outside Mom's apartment. Jay offered to fly to Boston and travel back with me for protection. His presence would make the trip possible when I might otherwise have canceled. The indie producer contacted me about recording my song professionally. He wanted to market it specifically as a story of parental abuse and estrangement. The commercial angle made me uncomfortable. I had to decide whether to commercially benefit from my trauma. After careful consideration and discussions with Dr. Sawyer, I agreed to record the song. I requested that a portion of any proceeds go to Second Chord's youth support programs. The project became about advocacy rather than exploitation. I felt better knowing my pain might help fund resources for others in similar situations. My return home coincided with a major development in the divorce case. Financial records revealed my father had been hiding assets. His deception was discovered through bank transfers related to my emptied college fund. The judge ordered a forensic accounting of all his finances. The financial investigation uncovered years of manipulative money management that had kept Mom financially dependent. This evidence strengthened her position for a favorable settlement. Evidence of financial deception usually results in the court favoring the wronged spouse in asset division. Dad's lawyer advised him to negotiate rather than continue fighting. The forensic accounting revealed enough questionable transactions that he might face additional legal consequences if the case went to trial. Dad requested a meeting with me, claiming he wanted to apologize face to face. After months of harassment and manipulation, this sudden desire for reconciliation seemed suspicious. I suspected this was another manipulation tactic, possibly intended to influence the divorce proceedings. I agreed only to a supervised meeting with Dr. Turner present. In the meeting, my father began with a formulaic apology. He said all the right words, but his body language remained defensive and his tone lacked sincerity. He quickly devolved into justifications and accusations. He blamed work stress, Mom's enabling of my disrespect, and even my music for creating division in the family. Dr. Turner had to repeatedly redirect him to take responsibility for his own actions. I finally had the opportunity to tell my father exactly how his behavior had affected me. I described the anxiety, the constant walking on eggshells, the feeling that I was fundamentally unlovable. Expressing these feelings to him directly triggered an intense emotional response. My voice shook, and tears came despite my best efforts to remain composed. Dr. Turner had to end the session when it became unproductive. My father became agitated when confronted with the reality of his behavior and its impact on me. He started raising his voice and making accusations, demonstrating exactly the behavior pattern I was describing. The failed therapy session seemed to be a turning point for Dad, but not in the way I'd hoped. Instead of reflecting on why the session went poorly, he became completely uncooperative in the divorce proceedings. He fired his attorney and began representing himself, filing motions to delay and complicate the process. The judge imposed sanctions for his obstruction, which only fueled his sense of persecution. During my visit, I spent quality time with Laurietta in their new apartment. She showed me her new routine, her school projects, and introduced me to friends she'd made at her support group. I noticed she still struggled with divided loyalties. She missed aspects of her relationship with Dad while recognizing the healthier environment with Mom. We had an honest conversation about how it was okay to love Dad while acknowledging his harmful behavior. I explained that people can do harmful things even when they love you, and it's okay to protect yourself. Mom's transformation continued to impress me as she built an independent life. She'd found a part-time job as an administrative assistant and was taking online courses to update her skills. She admitted feeling guilty about not protecting me sooner. We began our own healing process separate from Dad's journey. I realized that regardless of whether he ever changed, Mom and I could still rebuild our relationship. Before returning to Boston, I performed my song at a local venue with Jay and Marcus. It was a small show, mostly friends and supporters, but it felt significant to reclaim my music in the city where my guitar had been destroyed. My father showed up despite the restraining order. Security had to escort him out while he shouted accusations. He claimed he had a right to be there as my father, ignoring both the legal restrictions and basic respect for boundaries. The incident at the venue resulted in my father's arrest for violating the restraining order. He was released on bail within hours, years, but the arrest created a formal record of his violation. I returned to Boston earlier than planned for safety, cutting short my time with Mom and Laurieta. Back at Berkeley, I channeled the renewed trauma into my coursework, composing a suite of music about family healing. The compositions explored the complexity of forgiveness, the pain of necessary boundaries, and the possibility of growth after trauma. My professor worried about my emotional well-being while recognizing the artistic value of the work. He connected me with a music therapy program offered through the school's wellness center. Through music therapy, I discovered healthier ways to process my experiences. The therapist taught me to use music as a container for emotions rather than being overwhelmed by them. I sometimes struggled to separate my artistic necessary identity from my trauma narrative. Was I only interesting as a musician because of my painful backstory? I began exploring other themes and influences in my compositions. I wrote pieces about nature, friendship, and imagined characters to expand my range. The recording of my song was released on streaming platforms and gained unexpected traction. It was featured on a playlist of emerging artists and began accumulating thousands of streams. Reading comments from other abuse survivors felt overwhelming. Their stories of similar experiences validated mine, but also brought up complex emotions. I limited my social media engagement while appreciating the impact. Mom called with news that the divorce was finally settled. The terms required selling our family home. She received a fair portion of the assets and ongoing support for Laurieta's needs. She faced another transition while trying to maintain stability for Laurieta. The sale of our family home hit me harder than expected. Though I hadn't lived there for months, it represented the end of what I had once believed was a normal childhood. My father, faced with the consequences of losing his family and damaging his reputation, had a public breakdown. He sent rambling emails to extended family members blaming everyone but himself for the situation. Rather than feeling vindicated, I felt an unexpected sense of emptiness. I realized my healing couldn't depend on his suffering. Whether he improved or deteriorated further, my path forward needed to be independent of his journey. As the academic year ended, I earned a prestigious summer internship with a Boston recording studio. The position offered invaluable experience, but was unpaid. I couldn't afford to visit Mom and Laurieta as planned. The financial reality of independence meant making difficult choices between career opportunities and family connections. Mom surprised me by announcing they would visit me in Boston instead. She had saved part of her divorce settlement specifically for this trip. Accommodations in the city were expensive. Jay offered his airline miles to help with their flights. Marcus connected them with a friend who had an Airbnb and gave them a discount. Their visit coincided with a showcase where I was premiering new material about rebuilding and chosen family. The songs reflected my ongoing healing journey without directly referencing the trauma. I worried Laurieta might find the environment overwhelming. The showcase venue would be crowded and loud, potentially triggering sensory issues. We carefully planned sensory breaks and quiet spaces. I packed noise-canceling headphones, fidget toys, and arranged for a quiet room where she could retreat if necessary. The showcase was a success with Mom and Laurieta in the audience. Seeing them cheer for me triggered complicated emotions about the past. I remembered all the recitals and performances they had missed or attended with obvious disinterest. The contrast between then and now was both healing and painful. I broke down during our celebration dinner, finally expressing gratitude for their current support. The tears came unexpectedly over dessert, surprising all of us. During their visit, Mom revealed that my father had been trying to contact her about reconciliation. He had started therapy and claimed to be making changes. She had maintained firm boundaries. He was finally beginning to accept the permanence of their separation. His overtures seemed less about genuine remorse and more about regaining control of the situation. Before Mom and Laurieta returned home, we visited Scott, who had moved to a nearby town. The reunion brought up mixed feelings about family loyalty. I had always been taught that family problems should remain private, making my connection with Scott feel somewhat transgressive. We had an honest conversation about breaking generational patterns. Scott shared insights about our family history that helped explain some of my father's behavior. His own father had been controlling and abusive, creating a model that my father had followed. Understanding the origins didn't excuse the harm. I felt more resolved to create a different future for myself. As my first year at Berkeley came to a close, I reflected on how much had changed. I had arrived broken and defensive, carrying the weight of years of emotional neglect. I recognized the ongoing nature of healing from family trauma. The process wasn't linear, with good days and bad days often coming unpredictably. I committed to continuing therapy while pursuing my music education. I realized that healing would be a lifelong journey, not a destination to reach. My father, now living alone and facing the consequences of his actions, sent a letter that seemed genuinely reflective for the first time. Without the audience of family members or legal proceedings, his words carried a different weight. I wasn't ready to respond, but kept the letter as a sign that change, however small, was possible. Mom had already started building a new life without him. She had enrolled in community college classes and joined a support group for parents of children with autism. When he begged her for another chance, explaining that he finally understood the damage he'd caused to our family, she firmly told him no. Her newfound strength gave me permission to maintain my own boundaries. 1 year later, my life has transformed in ways I never could have imagined when my guitar was shattered that day. I'm thriving at Berkeley, where my original compositions about family trauma and healing have earned me a reputation as a songwriter with emotional depth. My relationship with Mom and Laurieta has blossomed, built on honest communication and mutual respect, rather than the toxic dynamics of our past. We've established new traditions, including monthly video calls where we share our achievements and challenges openly. Jay remains my rock, visiting Boston regularly and even collaborating with me on a small EP that's gained traction in indie music circles. My father has made halting attempts at genuine change, attending therapy and anger management, but I maintain firm boundaries, engaging only through occasional emails where I can control the interaction. The song I wrote about my family experience was featured in a documentary about family trauma, bringing unexpected opportunities and connecting me with other survivors who found their voice through art. Mom has discovered her own independence, returning to college to finish her long-abandoned degree, while advocating for parents of children with autism to recognize the needs of all their children equally. Lorietta and I have developed a real sibling relationship for the first time, one based on mutual support rather than competition. I still occasionally struggle with imposter syndrome and the emotional echoes of years of neglect, but I've built a chosen family of friends and mentors who remind me of my worth when those doubts surface. When I look at the new guitar that Jay bought me that pivotal day, now covered in stickers from my performances and travels, I see it as a symbol not just of what was broken, but of everything I've built from those fragments. My father never got the reconciliation he eventually sought from Mom. Her refusal was a final step in her own journey towards self-respect. I'm learning that healing isn't a destination, but a practice. One chord, one song, one day at a time. And whenever I perform, I leave an empty chair in the front row, not for the parents I wished I had, but as a reminder of the space I've created for myself in this world, a space that belongs entirely to me.